what CEOs and CIOs are hearing is that of the three emerging technologies, AI, IoT, and blockchain, the one that is likely to be the most disruptive and the one more likely to hit a wide spread of different industries is, in fact, AI.
Technology is transforming how we think, how we lead, and how we win. From Intervision, this is Status Go, the show helping IT leaders move beyond the status quo, master their craft, and propel their IT vision. Welcome to Status Go. I'm your host, Jeff Tunn. IT leaders are being called upon to lead a transformation within their businesses, a digital transformation. Today, I'm joined by one of the foremost authorities on digital transformation and the author of Driving Digital, Isaac Sokolic. Isaac has served as CIO and CTO in several industries and for companies from startups to multinational organizations. Welcome to the show, Isaac.
Jeff, I'm really happy to be here with you. It's exciting. You were a big supporter of my book when it came out, and I'm a big fan of your book, and we love collaborating on social media. So I'm really excited to do this cast with you.
I wanted to start with a look at the future. We're getting ready to release our predictions ebook, and I know you were generous enough to help us out with one of your predictions for 2019, and it was kind of a provocative prediction. To summarize, you said 2019 may be a day of reckoning for many organizations. What leads you to say that, and what's an IT leader to do in 2019?
Yeah, I gave that thought a lot, and you mentioned early that I've done a number of transformations already with small and larger corporations, and as hard as it is to get a transformation program started and to get a strategy and to get alignment of the executives and to get funding and to get the organization starting to implement things and think through how to change. Transformation programs don't get implemented in 6 months or 12 months or 18 months. They're multi-year programs. And, there's a few things that happen inside organizations over that time. First is some of the leaders, and you would expect this, want to start seeing results and value from the things that were implemented early. For CIOs who have been doing transformation programs for 2, 3, 4 years now, they better have a good story to tell, showing results through automation or showing results through some new applications, new ways of people working together. There needs to be a good communications and marketing program internally about what are some of the impacts that are happening from all the work that everybody's doing. And part of that is, as you're starting to do more of these things that are impactful, I talk a little bit about this on my blog in terms of detractors to the program. Not everybody is a winner.
Yeah.
There are people and organizations that are tied to the legacy business models in terms of how you're selling products or how you're implementing things or, what the world was like pre-automation, or in technology. Maybe you're doing a cloud migration as part of your strategy, and there are people who are really focused on data center work. So there's a lot of detraction that will come in as you're feeling success. And so those are some things that I think CIOs who are in this, sort of year 3 or 4 of their journey, I think those are things they have to consider. I think the last thing, and I think this is really why, I called it a day of reckoning. I mean, we've seen the markets have some jitters the last couple months. There are those who think that we're in a bubble again, that we might be hitting a recession over the next year or two, and so we know that as soon as there's any kind of downturn in the economy or some uncertainty in the economy or what customers are spending with us, that has a ripple effect in terms of what organizations are willing to fund and spend and how fast people are willing to move. And so, I am concerned about that. I don't think that's going to necessarily have organizations stop what they're doing. I think they're still going to feel pressure to keep innovating and moving their organizations forward, but it might be harder to, sponsor and promote the next part of the program. And so, that was the rationale behind that.
You mentioned your blog. It's tremendous reading, but I was reading your most recent post about five predictions for 2019, and one of them really jumped out at me, and that was the one where you talk specifically about AI and a couple of reality checks related to AI. Can you tell us a little bit more specifically about that?
Yeah, I mean, so what CEOs and CIOs are hearing is that of the three emerging technologies, AI, IoT, and blockchain, the one that is likely to be the most disruptive and the one that's more likely to hit a wide spread of different industries is in fact AI. And so I do quote some research there that AI advances will increase global GDP by up to 14% between now and 2030, and another 15.7 trillion dollars by then. So we're talking really big numbers and really big impact. And like every other transformation that involves in emerging technologies, there's an on ramp, there's a learning curve, there's a level of investment that needs to happen. And so, there are, some people who feel like they're lagging in this, and there's some people who feel like they have to jump in. And so, again, I think there needs to be some tempered approaches to how organizations are investing in AI in particular. First and foremost, they need to have a strong discipline around agile and experimentation. And the reason is that this isn't just a story about an implementation. I want to move to the cloud, or I want to build a new mobile application. This is looking at the organization's data. It's looking at ways it can impact its end users, and it's going through a series of experimentation in terms of what types of questions to ask, what types of algorithms, what types of infrastructure is needed to be able to get results out of an artificial intelligence. So you need the culture of being able to pivot, to do experimentation, to do agile iterations against things, and not all organizations have hit that yet. And the second part of this is really around the data and really having relatively clean data and tagged data if you're doing supervised learning. So, data is really important when it comes to artificial intelligence. We know most organizations are still implementing areas of their data governance. And so if you throw bad data, you throw data that has built-in biases into an AI, you're really going to have subpar results coming out of it. I also think that organizations need to do some looking at the underlying platforms. I think there's a lot of talk about going right into the core TensorFlows and the PyTorches and the underlying platforms that make machine learning and AI really possible. But I think I've been to a few conferences. There's a number of vendors out there that are selling easier to use on ramp type of technology so that the artificial intelligence is more accessible. There's also platforms that are now embedding AI inside. So these are things like operating technologies that put artificial intelligence and machine learning in their delivery. And so there's a lot of different avenues for an organization to invest in AI. And so they have to be smart about where they're focused. You have to be smart about, what is the practice and the data required, and be smart about how you go about executing these programs. So that was the basis behind that particular prediction: is be smart about how you're going about doing it.
So I want to talk a little bit more about AI here for just a second. And several years ago, in with the environmental movement, there was this concept of greenwashing, where companies were coming out with products and calling them "quote unquote" green when they were in fact just the same old products. Do we have that same thing going on in AI today, that companies are releasing products and slapping the AI moniker on them, and they're really no different than they were 5 years ago?
Well, I would say they're probably different than they were 5 years ago. They may or may not have AI inside. The difference I think is in terms of what is that platform presenting to you, and is that automation, or is that intelligence, or is that convenience that it's presenting to you as the end user? Is that giving you something of value? And if it's a neural network with a deep learning multi-layer system in the cloud doing this, or if it's some edge computing device doing reinforcement learning that's part of that, that's great. And if at the end of the day it's just a regression algorithm, or some heuristical rules, or some very simple natural language processing parsers that are solving the problem, and the platform is deciding to call it artificial intelligence, I'm a little okay with that as long as it's solving the problem and providing me convenience.
Right.
If it's getting my attention and really helping my organization move forward, we can call it whatever we want.
Yeah, yeah. I love the comment you made earlier about data. And in fact, in your book, which I'm a big fan of your book, you have a section in there about data. And I would love your take on how companies can become data driven, but also you use the phrase the data sins of our past. How can companies begin to overcome those data sins?
Yeah, so I was lucky to have worked at a few companies where data is in fact and analytics were part of their products, and so we had to very quickly accelerate how we were delivering analytics and intelligence back to our end users, and how to fulfill people who are looking for data science work, and data science intelligence, as well as those who were just learning how to work with analytics. So I got to see a lot of things early up front, and the very first thing I started feeling and started to write about was, it really wasn't a big data problem. It was a sum of a large number of little siloed data problems that I was feeling inside my organization. And then, now that I do some consulting, I see it in everywhere that I go. I'm talking about spreadsheets and small data marts, individual silo databases, copies and pastes of different data sources all over the place. And when I did some research for the book, I didn't realize how big of a problem it was. But a research firm quantified it, and they came out and said that there's about $60 billion a year wasted just in the manual manipulation of data in spreadsheets. And then I tell a story in the book about a company who had their data and spreadsheets analyzed, and they looked at how many spreadsheets and how many formulas and how many errors there were in the formula, and how many copy and pastes of the exact same spreadsheet there were. And this study was about a company called Enron. So I think the first I think the first sin is just recognizing, I'm not telling people get rid of Excel, or stop having doing analysis, but at some point you need to start centralizing your data repositories. You have to think about how to build automation in terms of how you're doing your analytics. And I think solving the siloed data problem is something that every CIO and increasingly more CISOs are becoming aware of, and you just got to chip away at it. So I think that's one of the sins of the past. I think a second one, when big data first came out and Hadoop clusters came out, I think our inclination was, let's go build the infrastructure to support all this data processing, and we will look for customers and problems to solve with it later. I think that was a byproduct of how we ran data centers. There were long lead times to set up infrastructure. Hadoop clusters needed a lot of processing power and a lot of storage. And if you flip forward today, there's a lot of different options: private cloud, public cloud, to get the infrastructure that you need. And so I think that the way to think about data today is think about what problem you're solving, what is the opportunity around it, what insights you're looking for. Assume that you can actually solve that problem with the data that you have or data that you can reach. How is it going to impact your business? And when you can find problems and analysis that can impact your business, then you can work backwards and say, what data do I have? What's its level of cleanliness? How do I bring multiple data sources together? Am I missing some data sources that I have to get at? Do I need some more infrastructure to process more data than I normally do? Then you can really start solving the infrastructure problem. And I think the third thing, I sort of highlighted it in the first, is this big word called data governance. It's a word that I think most more organizations are starting to understand from different sides of it. But what I tell people is if you put a data visualization on top of any single data set, without regard to what is underneath it, it might be your CRM data, it might be your operational data. The very first thing you're going to see is poor data quality, and when there's gaps of data, or when a salesperson hasn't filled out data the way you want them. So you're going to start thinking about how to improve the data quality. You're going to start thinking about how to make the data more accessible and how to democratize it, so that more people can use it to ask different questions. So you're going to think about developing data catalogs and dictionaries so that people use the data the way it was intended. And then you're going to start communicating policies. Who has access to what data? How can it be used? These are all the types of things that go into data governance. And if you start jumping in and solving data problems without, on the side, figuring out what your governance models are and how you're going to address these issues, well, there's a big, one of the big four companies out there in the news right now getting themselves in trouble because of that. So I think that's in the back of mind of CIOs and CISOs, and that's one of the things that organizations that are trying to grow revenue or become more competitive with data need to think about.
It really goes back to that old adage, garbage in, garbage out, and the more companies rely on data, the more that sin of the past, as you call it, raises its head. Right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here is garbage data in a lot of ways.
Well, let's not talk about it in binary terms, right? No data is perfectly clean and no data is complete garbage, right? So what we're really talking about is an iterative approach. Get some value out of the data that you have, learn from it, discover from it. Um, Consider what you're learning in terms of the underlying data quality. And so, as you're trying to get value on the data on the left side, use your right side to improve the governance and improve the quality
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah. Hey, I know from your social media posts. In fact, that's I always joke with people and say, Isaac and I we met online. That always sounds bad, but we really did meet through social media, through Twitter and some of those feeds. And I started reading a lot of your work around agile and the agile methodology, how to bring that into an IT shop. It's become even more important when you think about digital transformation. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you take that agile mentality and spread it throughout an organization beyond IT?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about that in the book because there's a lot of literature out there around how to run a Scrum, and how to scale Scrum, for example, or what goes into writing good user stories. So there's a lot out there on the mechanics of running a Scrum or an Agile process and how to manage it. There wasn't a lot out there in terms of, well, how do you apply Scrum and Agile toward organizational goals, toward improving customer experiences, or even to improving your data quality, right? How do you apply it to a long-term ongoing business objective and get the benefits of agile, that you're getting a collaborative, multi-skilled, multidisciplined, diverse team, problem solving, thinking short term because we're thinking in 2 week or 3 week sprints. We're increasingly developing things with automation and putting DevOps in so we can deliver things more frequently. So how do you get that sort of short-term execution on what's most important, but also deliver on long-term results? And so I think a lot of companies, and CIOs, chief technology officers, certainly chief digital officers, are thinking about this. And there's certain parts to it that I think that are key and important. First is this notion of product and customer focus, that we're not just improving the technology or improving the delivery over a 2 week period. It's how is it impacting customers? It's what are we learning about from customers that's going to drive our priorities, and how do we divide that up into small and bite-sized chunks? I think the second part in terms of transformation is there's a post I did about a year ago. You can do agile in your IT department, but really agile is where I see organizations either winning or losing on the business IT side of getting the collaboration that you need. Right. So it's not an IT process. So when we talk about transformation and getting more of the organization involved and getting feedback from them, I think Agile has a lot of the mechanics to enable that. And then once you get that feedback, it's this notion that I don't know exactly what I want 3 months from now or 6 months from now. I'm going to use that feedback at the end of every sprint and adjust and course correct. Something I thought was important isn't important anymore. Something that we implemented needs additional investment to get it right. We want to put some more data gathering in a place so that it becomes more usable for us. So I think when you think about transformation, you think about a strategy and you think about an endpoint, but you also think about what feedback I need along the way to make sure that I'm heading the transformation in the right direction. How do I get more people involved? And agile practices are designed to really do both of those things for organizations.
So you published Driving Digital about a year ago, and I know from following what you've been doing since, you've talked to a lot of different people. You've been to a lot of different conferences. You've spoken to a lot of different audiences. What have you learned as you've been out talking to people, and has it changed your thinking on driving digital?
Well, it's an interesting question because, I think back to 2007 when McGraw-Hill hired me to be the CIO for Business Week at that time. And, you know, at that time, they were trying to invest in a product that was essentially Dig and Reddit for the business user. It was called Business Exchange. And then we went on to do a lot of automation of how we deliver content on businessweek.com. And so I looked at the management team there and I said, you really want to build a software company inside Business Week, inside McGraw Hill, acting like a startup, doing agile development, and figuring out how to deliver analytics so that we can optimize a product that's a socially aware product. And they looked at me and they said, "Yep, that's exactly what we want to do." And so now, you flash forward, 10 years later, and you hear statements like every company has to be a technology company and every company has to be, truly competitive with its analytics. And so I would say the first thing I've learned is that, CIOs and CEOs are starting to get it. They're realizing that it's either sink or swim with how they're leveraging technology to competitive advantage. We're all homing in on a lot of the same similar types of practices that we have to put in place. Whether it's agile or it's DevOps or having a self-service BI program. A lot of us, particularly, we talk a lot on social media around technical debt and how to address our legacy items slowly as we're building up new things. We talk a lot about how to slowly get value out of emerging technology. So we're all going after the same things. We're all going after it in some of the same ways. But what we really talk about is how every organization is different in terms of its starting culture, its starting practices, the way people think about the business, the types of markets that we're going into. And so, what I learn every time I go to a conference or I do an interview with somebody is just how much organizations and leadership has to adapt. So it's not just agile. It's how do you make agile work when everybody is co-located, or maybe nobody is co-located, or maybe you're a $3.5 million charity like one of my clients, Charity Navigator, that's trying to do agile and change the way it's rating charities, but they don't have a business analyst and they don't have a scrum master and they're still trying to run scrum internally. So that the path that people are taking is very organizationally focused. They're recognizing the nuances of what their current culture is and what they're trying to change about it to make them faster and smarter and more innovative. And that's what I'm learning every time I go out to different people and leaders and organizations and conferences is about how they're going about doing that.
You touched on this a little bit in your answer about creating products within a corporate IT department. And this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart as the product executive for Intervision. Is this impact of digital on product strategy and product processes? Why is this product management piece so important to digital transformation? And why do you think this is so difficult for companies to undertake?
Great question. And this is one of the things I really like talking about because product management isn't necessarily new for startups and it's not necessarily new for technology companies. It's really new for organizations doing digital transformation where they're not selling technology as a product or a service. Now, so if you look at a digital strategy, and we all talk about, how to articulate it and how to communicate it and what goes into it, but we talk about missions, we talk about markets, we talk about goals. We might end up talking about who the end customer is and what's the user experience and journey and personas and what's the path to value, right? So look, those are all the sort of top-down things that we talk about that go into understanding customer experience and digital strategy. And then you look at your typical IT organization that grew up out of idle and service management and very ticket based. And when somebody asked for something and it was labeled as high priority, that's what we went and chased after.
Yeah.
And we sort of dealt with whether or not we had enough resources to do all the tickets that were coming in. Well, that's not really a strategic way to run an IT organization that's trying to really move their business forward. And so when you look at what's the gap there, how do I get out of chasing tickets and chasing, the thing from the loudest consumer and get more strategic and say, I'm going to understand what the strategy is. I'm going to understand what KPIs I'm trying to adjust. I'm going to define who my end users are and what's important to them. I'm going to define what their value equation looks like and how I'm going to measure whether I'm impacting them. And I'm going to take a voice of customer, but then I'm going to be strategic about how I'm going to define an end user experience that delivers all that. What I just defined is key elements of being a product manager and being a product owner. It's to take that strategy, listen to a lot of voices of stakeholders and end users, and home it into how do I go about implementing this in a strategic way that delivers value. And so that's classically what I think has been missing in IT organizations. I think CIOs have to think about how to develop that skill set, that practice in their organizations. And that's where I think, going from just delivering incremental value to one that's really delivering transformational value where a product mindset is going to help them.
I love that tie into a non-tech company and corporate IT and taking that product mindset and applying it to the delivery of your applications or the growth of your applications. I think we've been a lot of folks in corporate IT have been searching for that answer for a long time, and so I think you've really struck a chord there that I'm going to take away from this conversation. It's always such a pleasure to chat with you, Isaac. I learn something new every time we talk, and I really appreciate that. But I'd love to hear from you. What one question that I didn't ask you that you think our audience needs to hear your insights into?
Well, look, I mean, best way to follow my insights and my interests is just keep, following me where I'm writing and where I'm speaking. This digital transformation and driving digital is also an ongoing effort. So you can see it, from my writing on Star CIO. That's blogs.starcio.com. If you ask me a question on Twitter, that's NY Ike on Twitter. And, if you take the book and want to know where my book leaves off, Driving Digital, I do workshops and consulting off of it.
This has been tremendous, Isaac. I really appreciate it. We've covered a lot of ground here today, and I think our listeners will be able to take away several nuggets that they can apply right away. The ones that really jumped out at me were the If you're not doing agile, that's the difference between winning or losing in business and IT alignment, something we've all struggled with in the past. Those are the companies that are doing that alignment well. That we all have to adapt. We may be in different industries, but if we can adapt and take the path towards this digital transformation, our path may look differently, but we're going to end up in a similar place. And then finally, this concept about bringing this product management mentality into a corporate IT shop, I think is critical. For our listeners out there, you can go to intervision.com. The show notes will provide links and contact information. This is Jeff Tunn and Isaac Sikolik. Thank you very much for listening.
You've been listening to the Status Go podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes or get more information at intervision.com. If you'd like to contribute to the conversation, find Intervision on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Thank you for listening. Until next time.